G'day and welcome back to the channel. My name's Grant Frost and I'm an Australian musculoskeletal physiotherapist who's really passionate about trying to better understand the root underlying causes of common aches, pains, injuries and dysfunctions. And in today's video, I want to show you 3 extremely simple techniques that you can apply to your stretches that will genuinely, ridiculously improve how effective those stretches are. And as always, I don't want you to have to trust me. I don't want you to have to take my word for any of this. We want to make sure that the results speak for themselves. So as we go through this, please let me know in the comments down below what you find happens when you apply each one of these 3 techniques to your stretching routine. So let's get into it. When we're trying to resolve aches, pains and injuries, let alone improve your quality of life, our default is often set to strength work. If you were to present to a physiotherapist or a doctor with knee pain, the majority of our treatments often revolve around strengthening your knee to make it more robust. And while that's obviously an important piece of the puzzle, for me clinically, I've found that there's potentially a more important step to do before strength work, which is mobility. And in a lot of ways, we can't out-strengthen stiffness and tightness. There's certain techniques that you can employ with your strength training that will help with that. But sometimes it's just great to have direct, targeted things that you can do from a mobility perspective to just get the things moving better. And as we get through these 3 simple techniques, my hope is that they will help you feel that mobility work is an extremely meaningful piece of the puzzle for you, because once you've done some mobility work, you should just see so many good benefits in terms of potential pain relief and the obvious better function and improved mobility and quality of life. And so the first technique that I want to show you revolves around this idea that we don't just want to work on the muscular mobility. We want to make sure that underneath that muscle, the joint is moving normally as well. And the idea with this concept is that if you are doing something like a basic hamstring stretch and you're consistently trying to move the joint to a point where you can target that muscular tightness, and then you stay there and you hope that that muscular tightness reduces, if that hip joint underneath is rusty and stiff, where the joint capsule that surrounds the joint has become stiffer and tighter thanks to the amount of sitting that you do or something else about this modern world of ours, then you'll never really be able to express as much normal flexibility through the muscle tissue if the joint underneath doesn't have the give that it should. And while I'll definitely show you a technique that helps mobilize the joints of your arms and legs, I want to start by showing you something that helps mobilize the joints of your trunk. So if you're someone who deals with constant neck muscle tightness, upper trap tightness, lower back muscle tightness, or anything in between, we absolutely want to make sure that you have a targeted stretch that makes you feel like you're hitting that spot and it feels like it's effectively loosening it up. But what we can also do is we can take a ball and go looking for the joints underneath those tight muscles, whether it be the spinal joints or the rib joints through your thoracic area, to look for anything that feels stiffer, tighter and more restricted that might be prompting the muscle tissue over the top to be tight. And we've done this a lot on the channel before. It is my go-to exercise for mobility because it's just so effective and specific to you. So for example, if we take someone who consistently has tight upper trap muscles, we know that your upper traps anchor from your upper back and your shoulder blades into the various levels of your neck. So what we can do is we can take the ball, place the ball arbitrarily, let's just say below the bump at the base of your spine in towards your upper back. We can let it move off to one side, so we start to hit the joints of the spine, and if we go a little bit further, the joints of the rib cage as well. And then what we can do here is we can lie down on top of the ball and go looking for anything that doesn't necessarily feel tender, but feels stiff, tight, hard and restricted when compared to the other side. Find a spot that feels stiff, you can just stay here, just let the ball press in. You can take some deep breaths to help prompt your nervous system to feel safer and potentially help relax. And we can stay here for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever works for you. And once you've had enough, we can then move the ball up a little bit or down a little bit and systematically go hunting for anything that you feel is more restricted than it should be. And then what you'll hopefully find is that if you are someone who is, for example, tight through your upper traps, if you can work on the ball and try and free up the underlying joints below that upper trap tightness, then you might instantly find your ability to move and express motion through that upper trap improves straight away. So if you know what part of your neck and trunk feels restricted in some way, then go looking for that underlying joint-based restriction first. Because if you don't have normal movement through the joint, then it's almost impossible to then expect for you to express normal motion through the muscles that govern the movement of that joint. And then when we want to move more towards your shoulders, hips, and the rest of your arms and legs, we can start to bias that joint mobility mobility by using a band. So these power bands, which are the sturdy bands that you'll see in a lot of gyms these days, are an amazing way to bias peripheral joint capsules. For example, if you are someone who is wanting to stretch your hamstring muscle, but because your hamstring crosses the hip joint, we're not sure whether your hip joint capsule is one of the limiting factors to your mobility. What we can do with the band is we can slide the band right up into that hip crease and then perform the same stretch as before. This time, the band is pulling back on the joint and opening up the underside of that hip joint capsule, asking it to mobilize. So same thing as we did with the ball, we can go looking for anything that feels a little bit stiff, tight, and restricted, and then hang out here for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or a minute, generally asking that capsule to mobilize. And then what you should find is as soon as you've done that and you come back into the exact same hamstring stretch again, you might find that that hamstring muscle does not feel as tight as it did before. And the only nuance to consider with this is that you want the band pulling in a way that opens up the area that you're trying to stretch. So if you were trying to open up the front of your hip capsule, whether you were doing a hip flexor stretch or something like the couch stretch, we want to open up the front of your hip. So we want the band pulling the front of that hip open, biasing the front of that joint capsule. So once you've gone to work on trying to see what type of joint restrictions there might be underneath that tight muscle, the second concept that we can focus on is maximizing how effective your actual muscle stretches are. So one of the biggest misconceptions about traditional stretching these days is that when you do a particular stretch, again like a hamstring stretch, that the best way to stretch that hamstring is just to hold this position for 30 seconds. But we have better techniques. So the second thing you can work on to optimize the effectiveness of your stretching is that once you have found the same stretch that you're looking for, again, right in the muscle belly, what's really important that you do is that you find a way to tense up that tight spot. Tense it up for about 10 seconds. And then when you stop tensing while maintaining the position, the tissue will physically release a little bit, which means that you should then be able to go a little bit deeper into the stretch before you find some tightness again. And what this does, this creates a reflex in your brain where maximal contraction is followed by maximal relaxation. The fancy title for this is PNF Stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Other people call it tense relax or contract relax. It obviously doesn't matter. The end goal is that once you've found the tight spot, you activate it, make it work, relax, then go further and further. We want you to keep doing this until you've stopped making change. And then straight away, you should feel like you are more mobile through that part of your body than what you were beforehand. If you are doing an upper body stretch and say you're trying to stretch your chest muscles out, the position you get into to find the stretch is no different. It's just as soon as you find the stretch that you're after, we need to find a way to tense up the exact tight spot that you feel. Now, for some people, you might just be able to connect with that spot, make it tense up straight away. For other people, that might be difficult. And instead, what you can do is you can find the tightness and then push back into it. So I'm trying to push my forearm back into the frame without sort of moving my body. If we come back to the hamstring stretch and you just find it really hard to find and activate that tightness, then what you can do is maintaining this position, just find a way to use that by either pushing your heel down into the chair or suddenly try and bend your leg as well. Because if you can add in this PNF stretching to your routine, you deserve to see an immediate improvement in how flexible that muscle feels straight away. And then once you've started to address that underlying joint restriction and you've PNF'd the crap out of that muscle and you're feeling relatively loose and mobile, the third thing to focus on is to now actually use that newfound mobility. So once you've hopefully started to see more benefit from your stretching, the third thing to do is to actually use that newfound range. For example, if you've just been working hard on your calf muscle stretches, you've been doing the PNF contract relax, you've been going further, and you spent time doing the banded ankle stretch to really get to the underlying joint mobility restrictions, then the next thing that you've got to do is you've got to actually go through the process of using that newfound range of motion. Doing an exercise like a calf raise off a step where you're really going down as deep as you can and then coming back up again gives your brain the best chance to remap that new range and make it more permanent. And so this ties into that question of mobility, like when do you do it? When's the most optimal time to do it? Do you do it before you exercise or maybe after you exercise? For me, it's an absolute no-brainer to do all of your mobility work before you do the thing that's meaningful to you. If you are someone who goes to the gym and today is leg day day, do yourself a favor and do all of your ankle, hip, and knee mobility work before you do the thing that you need to do. Not only will you take away some of those hidden handbrakes that might be holding you back from giving an optimal performance in the gym, but strengthening your body through the new range that you may have just acquired will again help it stay there for longer. You're telling your brain and your body that you value that new range. If you wait until after you've exercised and you do your mobility work, yes, you might in theory be able to make a little bit more progress because your body's already a little bit warmer, it's a little bit more supple. But if you acquire this new range but then don't use it, then your body may be more likely to rebound back to what it's used to expressing without you realizing it. If we come back to that hamstring stretch where we've been working on freeing up the muscle of the hamstring with your PNF stretching, we've hooked a band out the back to try and find any deeper joint restrictions that might be complementing that. It's really important that you then use that newfound range of motion to the point where you go to the end of your range with something like a hip hinge and try and generate some fatigue in that range. So ultimately, whether you're working on the underlying joint immobilities, optimizing how you physically stretch with PNF, or using the end ranges of your motion, each one of those three techniques in isolation should help improve the effectiveness of your stretching routine. But obviously, if you combine all three of those together, if your goal is to improve your flexibility and your mobility, particularly from a muscular perspective, then these three things should be a strong focus for you. But as always, if you did find this helpful, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. Maybe consider leaving a super thanks if you want to help support me and the channel. But ultimately, thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time.